The fog has been rising since midday, creeping across the water, in layers so soft they seem to be breathing, until the island where you stand has become the only solid place in a world that has dissolved into grey and silence. You did not plan to be here. The boat that brought you has left, its engine sound fading into the mist, until even the direction it took has been erased. You are alone with the rocks and the few trees that cling to them, and the lighthouse that stands at the highest point, its light already burning, though the sun has not yet set. The lighthouse is old, built when ships still needed such guidance, when captains still trusted beams of light to show them where the dangers lay. Now it stands, mostly for itself, its rotation continued by mechanisms that no one tends. You climb the path that winds up from the small dock, the rock slippery with moisture that the fog leaves behind, until you reach the door that has been left unlocked, as if the lighthouse expected you, as if it has been waiting for someone to need it again. The door opens into a space that smells of oil and metal and the particular dust that accumulates where the sea air cannot reach. A chair sits near the window, facing the fog that presses against the glass, as if curious about who has entered. You sit in this chair and feel the stillness. That is not silence, but the presence of something that does not move, that has not moved for longer than you have lived. The fog continues to rise, or perhaps you are sinking into it, the distinction no longer mattering. You can sleep here. The lighthouse does not mind. It has stood through fogs thicker than this, through nights longer than this. It will stand while you rest, its beam turning slowly, steadily, marking time in a place where time has become irrelevant. The staircase spirals upward through the center of the tower, each step worn, where countless feet have climbed and descended. When the lighthouse required tending, the iron railing is cold to your touch, painted white, though the paint has chipped in places to show the grey beneath. You climb slowly, not from fatigue, but from the sense that hurry has no meaning here, that the fog outside will wait, that the light above will continue turning, whether you arrive or not. The steps number in the dozens, each one a decision to continue, each one a small surrender to the height and the narrowing of the space around you. The walls are lined with small windows, deep set in the stone, offering glimpses of the fog that has followed you upward, that presses against the glass, as if curious about your progress. Through these windows, you see nothing of the world beyond, only the grey that has become the only world there is. Halfway up, a landing offers rest, a small platform where the keeper once stood to catch breath before the final climb. You do not rest here, though your legs suggest it, driven by the need to see what the light looks like from inside, to understand the mechanism that continues without your understanding. The stairs grow narrower as you approach the top, the walls curving inward, the space becoming intimate, almost womb-like, before opening suddenly into the lantern room, where the light lives. The lens dominates, a massive construction of glass and brass that turns with a precision that seems impossible for something so large, so heavy, so utterly dependent on the balance of weights and gears that no hand has adjusted in years. You stand in its presence, aware of your smallness, aware that you are temporary in a space that has known the permanence of light against the dark. The lantern room is smaller than you imagined, the lens occupying most of the available space, leaving only a narrow walkway around its perimeter, where the keeper once walked to tend its needs. The glass walls surround you completely, offering a view in all directions that reveals nothing but the fog that has swallowed the horizon. The light source itself is simple, a bulb that burns with a steadiness that seems almost alive, its glow captured and multiplied by the prisms of the lens into something that can reach across miles of water, though tonight it reaches only into the grey that absorbs it without reflection. You watch the lens turn slowly, so slowly that you must fix your gaze on a single point to perceive the motion, the great glass structure floating on its bed of mercury with a frictionlessness that seems to defy the physics of mass and momentum. It turns because it turns, because it has always turned, because the weights descend, and the gears engage, and the mechanism knows no other way to be. The fog presses against the glass, so close now that you feel you could reach out and touch it, though the glass remains cold and dry between you and the moisture that has claimed everything outside. The light passes through this fog, diffused, scattered, becoming visible only as a faint glow that marks the island's presence. For any ship that might pass, though no ship passes, has not passed in years. You sit on the small stool that the keeper used, positioned to allow the monitoring of the flame, though there is no flame to monitor, only the steady burn of electricity that requires no tending. The stool is hard, unforgiving, yet you find comfort in its solidity, its refusal to accommodate your softness. The lens continues its turn, indifferent to your presence, carrying its beam through the fog that receives it without acknowledgement, that gives nothing back but the certainty of its own density, its own completeness, its own absolute refusal to part. The fog is not empty, though it seems empty, though your eyes find nothing to fix upon in its uniform grey. It contains moisture, particles of salt, the exhalations of the sea that has produced it, that continues to produce it, as long as the conditions allow. You watch it move, not as clouds move, with direction and purpose, but as something that breathes, that expands and contracts, according to rhythms too slow to perceive. It rises from the water, settles over the island, lifts momentarily to reveal a glimpse of rock, a suggestion of tree, before closing again, with the patience of something that has nowhere else to be. Sound travels differently through fog, muffled, distorted, arriving from directions that do not match their sources. You hear the water lapping against rocks that you cannot see, the sound coming from everywhere and nowhere, present without location. You hear your own breathing, amplified, intimate, the only rhythm that you can trust. In this place where all other rhythms have been suspended, the lighthouse beam passes through the fog without disturbing it, its light scattered into a glow that has no edge, no definition, only a gradual fading into the grey that surrounds it. You cannot see where the beam ends, cannot know if it reaches any eye that might need it. Time passes without markers, the fog allowing no change of light that might indicate progress toward morning. You exist in a perpetual twilight, a suspension that the lighthouse measures, with its turning, its steady unvarying rotation. That says time continues, even when you cannot perceive it. The fog does not care that you are here, that you watch, that you wait for something to change. It simply is, as the sea simply is, as the island simply is, as you simply are. All of you together in this condition that requires no interpretation, only acceptance. Below the lantern room, a small space served as home for those who tended the light, when tending was still required. A narrow bed, its mattress thin from years of use, its blankets wool and smelling of the sea. That seeps into everything on this island. A desk by the window, facing the fog that offers no view. Worth recording, yet the keeper sat here, writing logs that noted weather and passing ships and the small events that constitute a life lived in isolation. The pen still rests in its holder, dried of ink, waiting for a hand that will not return. You lie on the bed, not to sleep, but to feel what the keeper felt. The solitude that becomes not loneliness, but presence, the self expanding to fill the space that absence creates. The ceiling is low, the walls close, yet you feel no confinement, only the security of boundaries that hold you as the fog holds the island, completely, without escape, and without desire for escape. The lighthouse beam passes overhead, its rotation creating a rhythm of light and shadow that moves across the ceiling, across your face, marking time in intervals that you begin to anticipate, to expect, to need. The light arrives, departs, arrives again, and each arrival feels like reassurance, like the presence of something that knows you are here. The keeper left things behind, small objects that accumulated meaning through repetition of use. A mug for coffee, a book never finished, a photograph whose subject has faded beyond recognition. These objects do not mourn their owner, do not wait for return, simply exist as they have existed, available to anyone who might need what they offer. You close your eyes, not to sleep, but to feel the light passing over your lids. Warm, brief, then gone, then warm again. The lighthouse breathing its beam across your face with the regularity of something that has learned patience through long practice. The water surrounds the island completely, has always surrounded it, will continue to surround it, long after the lighthouse has fallen and the fog has dispersed. You hear it constantly, not as sound but as the bass note of all other sounds, the foundation upon which silence is built. The waves against the rocks create rhythms that vary with the tide, with the wind, with the distance of the storm that the fog has hidden from you. Sometimes gentle, a lapping that suggests affection. Sometimes sharp, a cracking that suggests anger. Always present, always speaking, in a language that needs no translation. You descend to the shore, or as close to shore as the rocks allow, the fog thick enough to hide the water. Until you are upon it, the sound preceding the sight, the rhythm established before the source is revealed. The rocks are slick, covered with algae that thrives in the moisture the fog provides. A pool has formed in the hollow of a rock. Rainwater or seawater or the condensation of the fog itself, holding still enough to reflect the grey above, to create a second sky below. A doubling of the world that makes you dizzy. If you stare too long, that offers the illusion of clarity, in a place where clarity has been suspended. You do not touch the water, though you could. You do not touch because the stillness seems sacred, seems earned through the patience of water that has waited for the fog to create this moment, this perfect untroubled surface. The water continues its sounds, its rhythms, its absolute indifference to your presence or absence, your attention or inattention. It simply is, as the fog simply is. As the lighthouse simply turns, as you simply stand on rocks that will outlast your standing. Listening to what requires no understanding, only the willingness to hear. You climb again to the lantern room, drawn by the need to see the source of what has been passing over you, to understand the mechanism that creates the rhythm by which you have begun to measure your existence in this place. The lens turns, indifferent to your return, continuing its work of scattering light into the fog that receives it without gratitude, without acknowledgement. Yet the light continues, has continued, will continue, because that is what it was built to do, what it knows to do, the only action available to something that has become pure function. You stand in its path, let the beam pass through you, warm on your face, then shadow, then warm again, the rotation creating a pulse that matches something in your body, something ancient and forgotten, the rhythm of safety, of presence, of being known by something that does not know you but knows that you are here, that you need what it offers. The keeper understood this, or came to understand it, the long nights of watching the light do what the light does, the slow realization that tending was not necessary, that the mechanism had learned to tend itself, that the keeper's presence was not required for the lighthouse to fulfill its purpose. Yet the keeper stayed long enough to leave behind the objects you found below. The bed you lay upon, the chair you sat in, the evidence of a life lived in service to something that did not require service, that continued regardless, that offered no reward beyond the knowledge of its own continuation. You understand this now, or begin to understand, the peace that comes from surrender to something larger, from the acceptance that your presence is not necessary, that your absence will not be noted, that you are temporary in a place of permanence, yet held completely while you are here, while you stand in the path of the light that turns, that turns, that turns without end. The fog will lift, or you will leave, or both, the distinction not mattering as much as it once did, as it will matter again when you return. to the world where distinctions are necessary, where clarity is required, where the fog is a condition to be escaped rather than a presence to be accepted. But that is later, is after, is a place you do not need to reach yet, that the lighthouse will release you to when the time is right, when the boat returns, when the fog decides or is decided for, when the world reclaims you as the world always reclaims those who stray from its requirements. For now, there is only this turning, this light that passes over you, this warmth that lingers after it has passed, this rhythm that has become your rhythm, the lighthouse breathing its beam across your face with the patience of something that has learned not to hurry, not to demand, not to require anything except the continuation of its own purpose, which is only to be light in darkness, to be signal in silence, to be presence in absence. You can sleep now, here, in the path of the beam, or below, in the keeper's bed, or on the rocks, if sleep takes you there, the fog soft enough to hold you, the lighthouse steady enough to watch, the water rhythmic enough to sing you into the rest you have earned, the rest you have allowed, the rest that waits for all who surrender to the turning, to the light, to the absolute and unvarying patience of something that knows only how to continue, and continues, and will continue long after you have gone, long after the fog has lifted, long after the island has returned to the silence it came from, the light still turning, still turning, still turning into the dark. Sleep now. The lighthouse keeps watch. The fog holds close. And everything that needs to continue already is.